Hi guys, it's Just Romantasy Fiction and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my ultimate guide to fantasy romance and romantasy books available on Kindle Unlimited. Alright guys, so if you're a fantasy romance lover like me, you know how exciting and sometimes overwhelming it can be to find the perfect fantasy romance or romantasy book on KU. So I am bringing you 20 fantasy romance recs of books that can be found on Kindle Unlimited, and I broke it down into categories. So we have spicy and dark fantasy romance, and then fae and high fantasy romantasy, and then some bingeable and shorter standalone fantasy romances, and then I even have a dragon shifter category. So those are all of the different recs you can find in this video. I will give you a spoiler-free plot synopsis of every book, along with my overall thoughts if I have read the book. And if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these fantasy romance and romantasy books. So starting off with dark and spicy fantasy romance available on KU. First up, we have Quicksilver by Callie Hart. If you're familiar with my channel, you know this was one of my top reads of last year. So in this fantasy romance, we are following Sarah's Fane, and she is a thief just trying to get by under the immortal queen's evil rule, and she ends up being captured and then unwittingly opens up a gateway between realms, and she is thrust into this frozen hellscape that is ruled over by ruthless fae. And once there, she becomes bound to Kingfisher, who is this warrior with his own dark agenda. And it's their romance. I love Kingfisher so much. He's so brooding and just absolute favorite. And this book was 5 stars. I think it is worth all of the hype. It has amazing banter. This story is so easy to just get completely lost in. And overall, this is a very fun time. And I cannot wait for the sequel to release. So do yourself a favor. If you have not read this yet, I highly recommend. And this next book I have not read yet, however, I have heard very good things, and it is on my April TBR. So it is Reign and Ruin, and I believe this is the first book in a multi-book new adult fantasy romance series. So in this, I know the heroine is an heir to a once great sultanate that used to rule with intellect and order. And then the hero is the Prince of Chaos, who is able to control shadows and harbors some sort of magical ability. And together they have to unite and combine the light and the dark in order to save their realm. So it sounds like it is going to be absolutely epic. I love any sort of hero that can wield shadow powers. It is one of my absolute favorites. And like I said, I have had a lot of friends read this series and have very much enjoyed it. So I will hopefully be picking this up in April. And of course I had to include my all-time favorite dark fantasy romance series, the Legacy series by Melissa K. Roehirch that starts with Reign of Shadows and Endings. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the series, check the trigger warnings. It does play around with the captor-captive trope, and it is a dark fantasy romance, so there are some upsetting subject matter that comes into play. So just know that going in. Personally, I love this series, so if you're unfamiliar with the plot, in this world, the gods gave power to their children, the Legacy, and the Legacy rule over the Fae. Our main character, Tessa, is a Fae, and she grew up believing that she would not become anything super powerful or be anyone really of status. So when she comes of age, she is very surprised to find out that she has been chosen as the personal source to the Heir of Endings. Now, this is a very big deal because she is now going to have these marks and tattoos placed upon her that serve as a forced mating bond with the Heir of Endings. And this is a very intimate ceremony that is going to take place, and Tessa wants no part of it. She is now going to be able to sense when the heir is near. He'll be able to feel when she is close. He'll be able to read her mind. She'll start to have physical attraction towards him, and it's just not what Tessa wants. So really this first book is Tessa trying to get out of this situation and kind of uncover the mysteries to what is going on in this world. And once again, I love this series, and I cannot wait for book 4 to drop, book 3 completely broke me. I'm actually going to be re-listening to it via audio because it is one of the only books I read physically last year. It actually took me like 2.5 weeks to finish. It took me a really long time, but oh my gosh, that book is so good. But anyway, if you have not read this, highly recommend. And next up, we have The Wraith King by Juliette Cross. So in this gothic romantasy, we are following Princess Una, who in order to save her people, Princess Una offers herself up to the feared Gallia Verbane. Now, Gallia wants to use Una as a pawn. However, he soon begins to realize that she is far more dangerous and alluring than he ever imagined. So, as treachery and dark magic begins to arise in his kingdom, Gallia has to decide if Una is his greatest weakness or his biggest weapon. And it is their romance. I loved this book. I really enjoyed the beginning half. I will say the second half, there was a bit of a tonal shift. I kind of wish we stuck with the dark captor-captive feels a little bit more. But overall, I absolutely love this romance. It was so hard to put down. So another one you should definitely pick up if you're looking for a dark gothic romantasy. And last up for dark fantasy romance, we have Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Maas. So this is the first book in a dark Why Choose fantasy romance series that is some of the best dark humor I've ever read. So in this story, we are following Alexis, and Alexis lives in a world that has been taken over by the Titans. Now, the only beings able to stop the Titans are the Spartans, who are children of gods. Now, Alexis is an orphan and is just trying to survive, so when she comes of age and takes a test that designates her as having Spartan blood, she is immediately whisked away to a Spartan war college where she has to fight to the death in the hopes of eventually being assigned a mentor that will teach her how to be the best Spartan. And the story really goes from there. Now, I will say all of the guys in this are completely unhinged, like they are complete villains, no remorse, really evil, and I love them all so much and cannot wait for the sequel to this book to release. Oh my gosh, I need it. I need it right away. So please, if you have not read this yet, it is so, so good. And the next 5 fantasy romance and romantasy books all feature fae. So starting off, we have A Court of Blood and Bindings by Lisette Marshall. This is the first book in the Fae Isle series. So at the start of this, we are introduced to Emmeline, our main character, and she is caught using forbidden magic. So she expects to die at the hands of the realm's greatest assassin, the Silent Death, but instead he whisks her away to the Crimson Court, where she has to face punishment from the ruthless mother of the Fae. And the story really progresses from there. I love this series. I feel like the magic system is so unique. So the way the Fae powers work are the Fae can pull power from colors. So if they want to use destruction magic, they would pull from red, healing from yellow, or you can combine the magic to make completely unique magic. And I just thought that was such an interesting dynamic. And I really enjoyed the romance. There is a character in here who can't use their voice, so the heroine has to teach them to sign, and I absolutely love their romance. Unfortunately, I am not caught up on this series. I think I read up to book 3, and then it took a while for the audiobook to release. But I do plan on doing a reread and continuing because I absolutely loved this romantasy series. And next up is The Dagger and the Forbidden Heir. Now, full transparency, I am a little less than halfway into this book. I started it a few nights ago, and I'm really enjoying it. Now, the story is following Leah, and Leah is the bastard daughter to the Fae King. Now, there is a war that is raging, and this war started because of Leah's birth, and she is forbidden from claiming the throne, so she just has to watch helplessly as her people die. Then we're also following Jace, who is a human that wants to stop the Fae's reign of terror, and unfortunately, as the battle is raging, both of them end up stuck together, and now they have to work together to save their people, and it's their romance. Now, I've heard a lot of mixed things in this book. I can definitely say the writing took me a little bit to get used to, but the beginning of this book immediately hooks you. Like, it was unlike any other prologue I've ever read. So overall, I am loving this, and it is available on KU. And next up, we have The Crown of Oaths and Curses by J. Bree. So Rixbane Evenstar has spent her life following a king who is never hers to follow. That is until the war between the witches and the Fae begins to consume the realm, and Rixbane realizes that there is only one Fae that can change everything. The savage Fae Prince, her greatest enemy, but also her fated mate. And it's their romance. I will say, when it comes to this book, go into it not really expecting much romance at all. This is true enemies to lovers. These two people, they hate each other. Rook and the Savage Prince absolutely loathe to the point that they would happily kill each other throughout most of this book. So with that being said, this is still one of the best fantasy romances I have ever read. I love Rook as a character. She is so strong, so determined, has way more patience, and puts up with way more than I ever would be able to, but she just wants what is best for her people, and I love her as a character. I've heard very, very mixed things about book 2. I haven't picked it up yet because there's still no audiobook out, but the first, I believe both books actually are available on Kindle Unlimited. And next up, we have A Kingdom of Stars and Shadows by Renee. So in this very, very spicy fantasy romance series, we are following Adara. And when Adara was born, she was born with a birthmark that designated her for having blood that, when consumed, would amplify a Fae's abilities. So her mother agrees that when she comes of age, she will marry the Prince of the Fae in the hopes that he will ingest her blood and thereby become very powerful. Now, when Adara comes of age, she wants nothing to do with this, but because her mother already made this agreement, she goes to the Fae realm where she meets her new husband, is not very impressed, and is trying to find a way out of this situation. And then she ends up meeting her future husband's half-brother, who is able to wield shadows. I'm pretty sure from what I remember, he's the head of the guard. And there's a bit of a love triangle situation, and the story really progresses from there. Now, personally, this is not one of my favorite series. I feel like towards the middle of this book, this really devolved into a lot of spicy time. And I love spice. It's just when it really impacts the plot and it makes it so, I don't know, found like I was fast forwarding through a lot of the spicier time through this book. But overall, I know a lot of people do very much enjoy this series, so if you're looking for a really spicy Fae fantasy romance, look no further. And last up for fantasy romance and romantasy books that feature Fae, we have What Lies Beyond the Veil by Harper L. Woods. So in this fantasy romance series, we are following Estrella, and Estrella is a woman that is living in a very patriarchal society, and this society is kept safe from the Fae via a veil, and the way they keep this veil running is by human sacrifice. Now, Estrella ends up being the human selected to be killed, but right before she is sacrificed, the Fae end up breaching the veil, and they all come spilling out and begin marking humans to capture and take back to the Fae lands. Well, Estrella ends up being marked, but she is able to escape along with another marked one, and together they are just trying to survive this new world that is inhabited by the Fae. So I absolutely loved book 1, 2, and 3. Books 1, 2, and 3, but I never kept going in this series. Now, I believe the final book in this series is about to release or just released, and so did the audio. So I do plan on re-binging this series and finally finishing it. I will also like to say that it does get darker as you progress, so maybe check trigger warnings. I think it's book 3 or 4. There was a lot of torture involved, so kind of know that going in. But overall, I really enjoyed this series. Alright guys, so the next 5 books feature either dragons or animal shifters, starting with Sanctum. So this is the first book in the Blackwater Pack series by Hannah McBride. Technically this is new adult, but I would highly recommend checking trigger warnings. There are some very upsetting things that take place specifically at the start of this first book. But in the story, we are following Skye Malcolm, and she is on the run from a very abusive pack. So she is fleeing to the Blackwater Pack in the hopes that they will take her in, provide sanctuary, and protect her from the abusive pack leaders she is running from. Then we are also following Remy, who is the heir to the Blackwater Pack, who will do absolutely anything to keep his pack safe, and he really does not want to take in a rogue shifter and have danger come to his door. However, he soon starts to have a connection with Skye, and it is their romance. And I will say parts of this do feel similar to Twilight. It definitely has those vibes, but I just love them together. And this, once again, is my absolute favorite shifter series. So more people need to read it, and it is available on KU. And next up is a Why Choose Dragon Shifter Romantasy that unfortunately I have not picked up yet, but I do plan on reading in April. So it is Ruined Wings. So hiding her true nature, Vale is desperate to save her sister from magic hunters that are sworn to kill her. That is until Vale accidentally unleashes her forbidden magic. Now she believes she is about to be killed, and instead she is saved by two dragon shifters, believing that she is the key to unlocking the curse that has been placed on their king. And I believe it's going to be a romance between Vale, the two dragon shifters, and then the king dragon. But that sounds so good. It's been a while since I've read a really good wide choose fantasy romance, and I have really high hopes for this. So this will be one of the first books that I read in April. And next up, we have The Zodiac Academy by Carolyn Beckman and Susan Valenti. Now this series features both a dragon shifter and a wolf shifter, so you get a little bit of both. And it is one of my favorite fantasy romance series. I've said this in other videos. I do feel like the series has been dragged out way longer than it needs to be. I still have not read the very last book. I do plan on reading it eventually. I did try starting it. I just have to really be in the mood for that type of romance and their writing. But overall, still, it has some of my favorite romances I've ever read. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Zodiac Academy, I will say the writing takes a while to get used to, but we are following Tori and Darcy Vega, who are twins, and really they only have each other in the world. They are orphaned and are just trying to get by in life. Everything changes when a vampiric professor shows up on their doorstep and tells them that they are actually Fae royalty, and in order to claim their Fae inheritance, they have to go to the Zodiac Academy, and once they graduate, they will be able to receive all of the money and everything their parents left for them. Now, when they go to the Zodiac Academy, they realize that there are already these celestial heirs that are ruling the school that don't want to hand power over to these Vega twins, and the first few books are very much a bully romance, but then so much more goes on. There are so many different romances to choose from, so many characters, a lot of POVs, and overall, it's just a very fun time, and all of these books are available on KU. And next up, we have Rabid by Ivy Asher and Raven Kennedy. This is a shifter standalone and deserves so much more love. I really enjoyed this book when I read it a few years ago, and I feel like no one really talks about it. But in this story, we are following our main character who has always dreamed of becoming one with her wolf and shifting. And this all happens during this beautiful ceremony where you get to meet your wolf and then your wolf takes over. Now, right before this ceremony is supposed to take place, the pack is taken over by a ruthless alpha who really treats our main character horribly. She's recently lost her mother, and she's terrified of this man. So during the ceremony, something goes wrong, and the alpha ends up attacking our main character, and the shift does not go the way it is supposed to. So now our main character is seen as rabid. She's not one with her wolf. And as punishment, she is sent to a wild pack where they assume she is going to be killed pretty much as soon as she gets there. But that is not what happens. Instead, our main character kind of embraces being rabid and is out for revenge. And it's her story, and I love this, highly recommend, and once again, available on KU. And last up, we have Obsession, which is the first book in the Mate Games series. Now, in this series, we are following Sunday, and Sunday is the heir to a very powerful werewolf pack, but unfortunately, she is unable to shift. And on top of that, she has recently rejected her fated mate. So her family is not too happy with her, and they send her to Ravencroft University, where she will go meet other paranormal creatures and hopefully learn how to become a very good werewolf. Now, when she gets there, she realizes that the mate she rejected is also attending and has already turned the entire school against her, and she soon catches the attention of a vampire prince, a vampiric priest, a demigod, and then her rejected fae mate. So it is a wide choose kind of paranormal romance between all of them. Now, admittedly, I've only read this first book, but I do plan on continuing the series, probably not until spooky season though. And the last 5 books are all fantasy romance and romantasy standalones that can be found on KU. So starting off with Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. In this story, we are following Selena, and when she was very young, she was orphaned and living on the street. So she eventually joined this cult and gave this cult absolutely everything, including her eyes. Now, she was gifted the ability to see the threads of fate in exchange for her eyesight, and this is how she really interacts with the world. So this is a very unique concept. But anyway, she's been trained to become an assassin, and she is given the mission to infiltrate the vampire conqueror's army and become his seer and eventually kill him. Unfortunately, her heart has other plans. So I very much enjoyed this story. It is set in the same world as The Crown of Nyaxia, I believe, but once again, it can be read as a standalone and is available on KU. And next up, we have one of my top reads of the year, These Scattered Bones. Now, do not let the length of this book fool you. This book is packed with so much plot and world building and one of the most epic romances. Oh my gosh, I love this book. And it felt like I read an entire 5-book fantasy romance series by the time I finished. If you're unfamiliar with the story, we are following Sela, and Sela has recently lost her greatest love, Cade. Now, a mysterious stranger ends up approaching Sela and says that if she is able to find all of Cade's body parts that have been scattered across the realm, he will be able to reanimate Cade. Now, this is an incredibly dangerous mission because not only are Cade's body parts scattered throughout the realm, they are also guarded by vengeful gods. So Sela is going to have to complete these deadly trials in order to find these body parts in the hopes of bringing her greatest love back. And just watching Sela and her determination, I loved this book. It's also told in 2 different timelines. So part of it, we're watching the past unfold and Sela slowly fall in love with Cade. And then we're also watching the present, Sela just doing absolutely everything in her power to bring Cade back to her. And if you have not read this, do yourself a favor, pick it up. It is so, so good. And next up, we have 6 Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. So in this story, Lilith has known she was dying since the day she was born. However, when a god-cursed illness threatens the lives of everyone in her village, Lilith refuses to accept fate. Desperate to save her people, she ends up striking a bargain with Vale, a feared vampire. In exchange for 6 vials of his blood, she will give him 6 roses. And slowly, their bond grows from friendship to something more. I don't know how Carissa Broadbent was able to make this feel like such a slow burn romance. It is quite short. It's considered a novella, but oh my gosh, I wanted these 2 people just to embrace their love and finally kiss already. I was screaming it throughout half of this book. But this is another one where it feels like a full series just packed into such a short book. So highly recommend if you have not read 6 Scorched Roses. It is one of my favorite novellas. And next up, we have a dark fantasy romance standalone, Order of Scorpions by Ivy Asher. So for the last 6 years, Offset has fought to survive in a brutal world where the only choices are kill or be killed. And all of that is about to change now that the 8 different assassin groups have come to buy a new blade slave, and Offset is for sale. So throughout this book, we are introduced to Offset, who has no memories of her past, and she ends up being captured and trained in this assassin guild, where she is eventually purchased by the Order of the Scorpions. And at first, they are trying to train her up to become an assassin, but then they start to understand that she has no history and she's just desperate for answers. So it's a romance between all of them. And this is such a solid Why Choose standalone, and I feel like no one talks about it. Now, this is quite a chunky book. I think it took me about 2 days to finish, but I was fully engrossed in this story, and I still think about this romance from time to time. So highly recommend, and it is available on KU. And last up, we have A Dance with the Fae King by Elise Kova. I believe this is part of her Married to Magic series. So in this story that is loosely inspired by Cinderella, we are following Karina, who ends up in an arranged marriage looking for a fresh start, only to discover that her new husband is actually a fae in disguise. And when she stumbles upon a magical ceremony, she accidentally steals ancient magic, and now she is whisked into the fae realm, and a bunch of fae want her dead, and the only person that can protect her is her new husband. So I do remember enjoying this book. It has been so long since I've read it, but all of the Married to Magic books by Elise Kova are standalones. They all follow different creatures, like one is an elf, and elves, fae, a siren, just a bunch, and they are all standalones that are available on KU. All right, guys, that is it for my ultimate guide to fantasy and romantasy books available on Kindle Unlimited. Please let me know down in the comments below what is your absolute favorite KU fantasy romance book. And I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Jess, Leslie, Lotta, Kat, Kylie, and the Sandrea family. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.